It's time for the news.
Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf is taking part in the high-level week of 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York following instruction of the President of the Republic. Algeria has condemned in its strongest terms the explosions caused by the Israeli occupation cyber attacks targeting telecommunication devices in Lebanon on September 17th and 18th, which left dozens dead and injured. In Lebanon, over 30 people, including women and children, have been killed in the Israeli attack targeting the southern suburb of the capital Beirut. Those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. The President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, has congratulated President Abdelmadjid Tebboune for his re-election for a second term. In his message of congratulations, President Ramaphosa expressed his warm wishes on behalf of the South African government and people to President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. He said the re-election of President Tebboune reflects the level of trust placed in him by the Algerian people. He also reaffirmed his desire to promote and further strengthen bilateral relations at the service of issues of common interest. The Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, Army General Said Shangriha, has congratulated President Abdelmadjid Tebboune for his re-election for a second term during his field visit to the 1st Military Region in Blida Province. In his statement, the Army General also stressed the importance of the operational readiness of the unities and the strengthening of security and stability. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and the National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, is taking part in the high-level week of the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York following instruction of the President of the Republic. Asya Bikkar has the details in this report.
The Algerian foreign minister will participate as a representative of the President of the Republic in the two-day summit of the future as of tomorrow, Sunday, and in the general debate of the General Assembly scheduled for September 24th to 30th on the theme Acting Together for Peace, Sustainable Development and the Human Dignity of Present and Future Generations. Given that Algeria is a member of the UN Security Council, the foreign minister will also participate in several high-level meetings to be organized outside the General Assembly, notably the debate scheduled at the request of the Algerian delegation on the Palestinian cause and the meeting called for by the Slovenian presidency of the Security Council on activating multilateralism in promoting international peace and security. On the sidelines of the high-level week of the General Assembly, Mr. Attaf will also participate in meetings scheduled within the framework of the geopolitical groups to which our country belongs, such as the Arab League, the African Union, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Non-Aligned Movement, and the G77 plus China. The minister will also have several bilateral meetings with his counterparts from sister, friend, and partner countries.
Algeria has condemned in its strongest terms the explosions caused by the Israeli occupation cyber attacks targeting telecommunications devices in Lebanon on September 17th and 18th, which left dozens dead and injured, and has stressed that these attacks constitute war crimes and a blatant violation of Lebanon's sovereignty and international law. Speaking at an emergency meeting of the Security Council held to discuss the situation in the Middle East and the Israeli occupation attacks on Lebanon, Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador Amr Ben Jameh, said that these tragic events had resulted in dozens of deaths and injuries following the remote explosion of small communication devices in various parts of Lebanon, adding that the perpetrators of these acts is well known.
These tragic events have resulted in dozens of deaths and thousands of injuries, following the remote detonation of small communication devices across the country. The perpetrator is well known. We strongly condemn this Israeli attack. Such actions represent a blatant violation of Lebanon's sovereignty, of the UN Charter, of the international law, and of Resolution 1701 and 2749. Algeria stands in full solidarity with Lebanon during these difficult times, and we extend our deepest condolences to the government and to the resilient people of Lebanon. And we commend the Lebanese authorities for their measured and responsible handling of this grave crisis, preventing further escalation.
Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations stressed that these attacks amount to war crimes, pointing out that the deliberate and indiscriminate nature of the Israeli occupation's attack has shown panic among civilians by targeting densely populated areas.
These acts of aggression amount to war crimes. The deliberate and indiscriminate nature of these Israeli strikes has caused terror among civilians, with densely populated areas being targeted. This dangerous precedent turns civilian devices into bombs, threatening the safety of all and posing a significant threat. This precedent opens a dangerous Pandora box. What will happen if such unfamiliar tactics are replicated by terrorist groups while the international community calls for desescalation? Israel pulls the region toward war, expanding hostilities from the Blue Line into the entire Lebanese territory. The Israeli officials have openly threatened to launch a large-scale war in Lebanon. These attacks were followed by official statements praising the so-called positive result. The airstrike against Beirut this morning are another proof that the Israeli occupying power is not at all interested in peace.
The Algerian permanent representative further questioned whether the Israeli occupation authorities are really seeking peace with their neighbours and whether they are really committed to implementing Resolution 2735 and a ceasefire in Gaza, calling for an end to the aggression of the Israeli occupier, who must withdraw from all occupied Lebanese territories, insisting that ending the occupation is the only way to pave the way for lasting peace and stability in the region.
Do Israeli occupying authorities truly seek peace with their neighbors? Are they genuinely committed to implementing Resolution 2735? Are they really committed to a ceasefire in Gaza? Mr. President, the Security Council bears the solemn responsibility to uphold the principle enshrined in the UN Charter. The Security Council must enforce its resolution. Resolution 1701 must be fully implemented without bias, and the Israeli occupier aggressions must cease, and it must withdraw from all occupied Lebanese territories. Only by ending the occupation that we could pave the way for lasting peace and stability in the region.
At Lebanon's request, Algeria had called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council to examine the serious developments in that country, notably the explosions caused by large-scale cyber attacks, which killed 37 people and injured more than 3,500. Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations office in Geneva and to international organizations in Switzerland, Rachid Beladhan, has called on the international community to step up its efforts to eliminate anti-personal mines and to ensure the full support and inclusion of the survivors and victims. Asya Bekkar has more details in this report.
In a statement made at the 57th session of the Human Rights Council, Mr. Beladhan urged the UN member states to strengthen their commitment to the relevant international treaties and to unite in building a mine-free world, including through a mine awareness and education campaign, in particular through the ratification and implementation of the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention.
We urge all UN member states to reinforce our commitment to relevant international treaty, including through the ratification and implementation of the Anti-Personal Mine Ban Convention, accelerate the mining efforts and ensure comprehensive victim assistance, collaborate closely with international organizations, civil society and other partners to share knowledge, resources and best practices in the mining and victim support, promote education and awareness regarding the dangers of landmines.
Mr. Biladhan pointed out that the anti-personnel mines are a blatant violation of human rights, notably the right to life, adding that it also violates the right to health and education and deny the communities access to essential resources such as food and water.
Anti-personnel mines blatantly violate human rights beyond the right to life, which is inviolable. They similarly undermine the right to health and education and prevent communities from accessing essential resources such as food and water. The degradation of explosive ordnance can cause contamination of soil or groundwater, trigger forest fires, and generally harm the environment. No state has any justification for using these weapons. This lingering remnant of past and recent conflict continue to pose a threat to human life and impede sustainable development.
That was Algeria's permanent representative to the United Nations office in Geneva and to international organizations in Switzerland, Rashid Biladhan.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the United Nations General Assembly's adoption of the Declaration and Programme of Action on the Culture of Peace. In the declaration, the United Nations' most inclusive body recognized that peace not only is the absence of conflict, but also requires a positive, dynamic, participatory process where dialogue is encouraged and conflicts are solved within a spirit of mutual understanding and cooperation. The UN said that in a world with rising geopolitical tensions and protracted conflicts, there has never been a better time to remember how the UN General Assembly came together in 1999 to lay out the values needed for a culture of peace. In his message made on the occasion of the International Day of Peace, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said currently peace is under attack, stressing that this catalogue of human misery must stop.
Everywhere we look, peace is under attack. From Gaza to Sudan to Ukraine and beyond, we see civilians in the firing line, homes blown apart, traumatized, terrified populations who have lost everything and sometimes everyone. And this catalogue of human misery must stop. Our world needs peace. Peace is the ultimate prize for all humanity. And as this International Day of Peace reminds us, the solutions are in our hands. Cultivating a culture of peace means replacing division, disempowerment, and despair with justice, equality, and hope for all. It means focusing on preventing conflict, propelling the Sustainable Development Goals, promoting human rights, and tackling all forms of discrimination and hate. This month's Summit of the Future is a vital opportunity to advance these aims. Let's seize it. Together, let's lay the groundwork for peace, and let's nurture a culture where equality, peace, and justice thrive.
The United Nations said that the International Day of Peace has always been a time to lay down weapons and observe ceasefires, but it now must also be a time for people to see each other's humanity, on which the survival of the world's peoples as a global community depends on. Moving to the situation in the Middle East, in Lebanon, over 30 people, including women and children, have been killed in the Israeli attack targeting the southern suburb of the capital, Beirut. Over 60 others were wounded in the Israeli attack, which came in the wake of a series of explosions caused by cyber attacks blamed on Israel that hit Beirut and the country's southern regions. 37 people were killed and more than 3,000 others wounded in the attacks perpetrated 3 days ago. Evoking the Israeli attacks, the Lebanese Foreign Minister Abdullah Habib stressed the necessity to implement Resolution 1701 to put a halt to occupation.
They never denied it, the Israelis. They're always preparing for a war. And let me say this, whenever there is occupation, there is resistance. This is an international law, international understanding. Occupation means there is a resistance. And the Israelis say that they implement 1701 where? Every day there is a violation, especially in the air. Every day since 2006.
Earlier, the UN Under Secretary General for Political Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, warned that the attacks on Lebanon would lead to a more destructive conflict in the Middle East. Addressing a meeting of the UN Security Council held at Algeria's request, she advocated diplomacy to prevent the situation from worsening further and to avoid more devastation and suffering. Over 20 Palestinians, including 8 children, have been killed in new air raids carried out by the Israeli army on a school sheltering displaced in Gaza. Asya Bakar has the details in this report.
According to Palestinian sources, over 30 others, mainly women and children, were wounded in the attack which hit the Zaytun school, where thousands of displaced have sought refuge fleeing the fighting raging in Gaza for nearly 1 year now. Earlier, the news agency Wafa affirmed that 44 people were killed in the Israeli bombardments that hit various parts of Gaza, including the central area of Beit Lahia. More than 41,300 Palestinians have been killed so far, and thousands of others wounded in the Israeli bombardments that damaged Gaza's main infrastructure and caused an unprecedented humanitarian disaster. Meanwhile, King Abdullah II of Jordan warned against serious escalation in the region and stressed the necessity of reaching a lasting and immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. In this respect, he called for an end to be put to the attacks perpetrated by Jewish settlers against the Palestinian population in the West Bank, as well as against the Islamic and Christian holy places in occupied Jerusalem. The Jordanian king also urged for a reinforced international response to the humanitarian situation in Gaza and for more support to UNRWA to help it fulfill its mission.
On Monday, the Council of the Nation will open its 2024-2025 ordinary parliamentary session under the chairmanship of the Council President Mr. Saleh Goujil. The opening of the session takes place in accordance with the provisions of Article 138 of the Constitution and Article 5 of Organic Law 1612 of August 25, 2016, defining the organization and functioning of the National People's Assembly (APN) and the Council of the Nation, as well as the functional relations between the two chambers of Parliament and the government. The CEO of the Sonatrach, Rashid Hashishi, has held talks with a high-level Libyan delegation led by the Libyan Minister of Oil and Gas, Khalifa Abdel Saddeq, on the sidelines of his participation to the Gastech World Energy Conference in Houston, Texas. The meeting centered on operation under the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Sonatrach and Libya's National Oil Company, NOC, to which the amendment had been introduced earlier this year for the resumption of the Algerian group's activities under the contractual commitments and to develop the oil and gas fields discovered in partnership with Libya. During the meeting, the two parties reaffirmed their commitment to strengthen cooperation to achieve their shared strategic objective in this vital sector. And now, the Moroccan Human Rights Organization has stressed that the Moroccan regime is using the illegal migrants to blackmail Spain and European countries to obtain more money to secure the borders. Following the major wave of migration towards the Spanish city of Ceuta last Sunday, which came after the last visit of Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez to Mauritania and Senegal. That's it for today's news bulletin. I invite you now to listen to a special program by my colleague Mohamed Khatil. Stay tuned on Radio Algeria International.
Hello and welcome to this new edition of your weekly program, The Health Magazine, during which we will shed light on a very common health issue that affects many children around the world. Most kids have an excess of energy at times, but the main question is how often do you have to tell your child to slow down, stop interrupting, or stay still? Hyperactivity is a classic sign of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. It also occurs with other conditions. Hyperactivity means having increased movement, impulsive actions, and a shorter attention span, and being easily distracted. Attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, is marked by an ongoing pattern of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity that interferes with functioning or development. People with ADHD experience an ongoing pattern of the following types of symptoms. Inattention means a person may have difficulty staying on task, sustaining focus, and staying organized, and these problems are not due to defiance or lack of comprehension. Hyperactivity means a person may seem to move about constantly, including in situations when it is not appropriate, or excessively fidgets, taps, or talks. In adults, hyperactivity may mean extreme restlessness or talking too much. Impulsivity means a person may act without thinking or have difficulty with self-control. Impulsivity could also include a desire for immediate rewards or the inability to delay gratification. An impulsive person may interrupt others or make important decisions without considering long-term consequences. The signs of hyperactivity are hard to miss, and they often prompt negative reactions from other people. Until you know the reason behind the behaviors, you may find yourself getting annoyed and thinking that your child is just acting out. But if your child has ADHD, his overactivity is caused by differences in how the brain works. Here are some behaviors that are common with hyperactivity. Talks almost constantly and frequently interrupts others, moves from place to place quickly and often clumsily, keeps moving even when sitting down, bumps into things, fidgets and has to pick up everything and play with it, has trouble sitting still for meals and other quiet activities. Now, what could be the cause of hyperactivity? ADHD is a frequent cause of hyperactivity in children, but it's not the only possible cause. Other conditions can cause kids to move around and talk too much, just for different reasons. Here are some of the issues you may want to read up on and talk about with your child's doctor. Let's explain a bit more what does ADHD mean. ADHD, or Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, is a chronic condition marked by persistent inattention, hyperactivity, and sometimes impulsivity. ADHD affects children and teens and can continue in adulthood. ADHD is the most commonly diagnosed mental disorder for children. Children with ADHD may be hyperactive and unable to control their impulses, or they may have trouble paying attention. These behaviors interfere with school and home life. It's more common in boys than in girls. It's usually discovered during the early school years when a child begins to have problems paying attention. Adults with ADHD may have trouble managing time, being organized, setting goals, and holding down the job. They may also have problems with relationships, self-esteem, and addiction. We should also emphasize that being hyperactive doesn't just mean zooming around the room. Kids may fidget or have extra movements even when doing little things like tying their shoes, writing, or playing an instrument. Kids with ADHD also tend to be impulsive and have trouble paying attention. ADHD may look different at different ages. For example, a preschooler might be accident-prone, while a grade schooler might not be able to sit still long enough to finish his work. Anxiety disorder. Anxiety can make kids restless and unable to focus. Those symptoms sometimes lead people to mistake it for ADHD. It's not uncommon for a child to have both conditions at the same time, however. Hyperthyroidism. Kids rarely have this condition, but when they do, it can cause them to fidget and lack focus. It also often involves eye issues like an irritation or bulging. Inner ear disorders. Kids with inner ear problems are often hyperactive. These kids' need for constant motion may be caused by their hearing and balance disorders. Sensory processing issues. Kids with sensory processing issues can become hyperactive when they are overstimulated or understimulated. How to cope with hyperactivity. Getting to the bottom of your child's hyperactivity is a process that may take a few steps. A good way to start is by observing your child and taking notes. Having these notes will be helpful when you talk to a professional about your concerns, and it may help you get answers more quickly. Here is what you can do to understand what's behind your child's hyperactivity. Talk to your child's teacher. Hyperactivity can affect learning. That's why it's a good idea to reach out to your child's teacher. Together, you can talk about classroom strategies that can help, such as using a secret signal to cue your children to stay on task. Look into an educational evaluation. If you think your child's hyperactivity is affecting his learning, you or your child's teacher can request that the school evaluates him. Depending on the results, your child may be able to get services and supports to meet his needs that might include things like taking breaks during tests or taking tests in a separate room, where there will be fewer distractions. Talk to your child's doctor. This is also a good place to start. Bring your notes with you to the visit and share your concerns. The doctor may want to rule out hyperthyroidism and other possible medical causes of your child's hyperactivity. There are some questions you're likely to be asked to get a better sense of what's going on. They may include things like how long you've been seeing this behavior, whether it's getting worse, and whether the teacher sees it too. The doctor may also recommend a psychological evaluation to look at how your child thinks and to assess whether he has ADHD or anxiety or both. Talk to specialists. You may be referred to more than one specialist to get to the bottom of your child's hyperactivity. An audiologist would look for hearing problems. A neurologist, psychiatrists, or developmental behavioral pediatrician would look for brain-based medical issues including ADHD, and a psychiatrist or psychologist would diagnose anxiety disorders. Professionals who can prescribe medications for these issues include your child's doctor, a psychiatrist, a neurologist, or a physician's assistant. See a private learning specialist. ADHD can have a big effect on your child's learning. A psychologist can do an evaluation to see what the impact is and if any learning issues are at play. The tests are the same as what they use in a school evaluation. Tutors can help kids develop strategies to keep ADHD from getting in the way of their learning, but tutors not perform formal evaluations. What you can do now to help your kid. Even if you don't get an evaluation, there are many things you can do to find support. There are also strategies you can try to help your child manage his behavior. Just remember to pace yourself. Trying too many at once can make it hard to figure out which ones are working the best for your child and for you. Here are some suggestions. Learn as much as you can. Understanding your child's hyperactivity is the first step to getting him the help he needs. The more you know, the better able you'll be to find ways to help him gain self-control skills. Observe and take notes. By observing your child's behavior, you may be able to spot patterns and triggers. Maybe his activity level rises as the night wears on, or perhaps he has a hard time falling asleep and is overtired. Recognizing the trigger allows you to try different strategies like changing his bedtime routine to have more quiet time and get a full night's sleep. Provide things to fidget with. Let your child chew gum, carry a stress ball, or have some other object to fiddle with. It can help direct some of the overactivity and cut down on your child picking up and playing with other items. Consider martial arts or yoga classes. Physical activities give your child an outlet for his energy. These can also teach your child to be aware of his movement and be in control of his body. Try different strategies. For new ideas on dealing with behavior issues, check out the expert advice in Parenting Coach. You might find helpful tips for handling your energetic child. Connect with other parents. Knowing you're not the only family out there dealing with hyperactivity can make a big difference. Connect with parents in similar situations and share information and advice. It can be a great source of support. Understanding more about what's going on with your child can help you start to get out in front of his behavior issues rather than always reacting to it. Looking at your child's strengths, finding support for yourself, and changing things a little at a time can make both of you feel more confident and in control. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the Health Magazine. Do join us next week for a fresh edition of our program. Until then, have a good time and take